going on. Young men are simultaneously less dangerous and more dangerous than people think. The average, he's saying, the average young man is capable of tremendous violence, but the majority, outside of the deranged and mentally ill, never act on the rage-filled fantasies that bubble up during adolescence. You want to beat up your bully or snap at your parents, but the average young man recognizes toxicity of the rage and never acts on these urges. He understands that he is a member of society and he must restrain the ancient bestial impulses. You will not choke out the incompetent, okay, this is funny, or slam the chair, or okay, so you're not going to act out, he's saying. You keep that at bay, and you know how to handle it. That's part of being a man. You know how to, right, prudence and temperance, right? Temperance. You know how to control yourself and control your emotions and handle yourself as a man. So working out, playing sports, dedicating countless hours to esoteric hobbies, and communing with your fellow men in women-free spaces, and that's important, right? You got to be in men-only spaces to develop as a man, and healthy ways of keeping the beast at bay. But if these activities are labeled toxically masculine and young men are discouraged from participating in them, what will fill the vacuum? So always something fills a power vacuum or an identity vacuum, right? Will it be a nihilistic malay, or worse, the beast? So if they're told not to do that, and if it's poisoned, where will boys and men go? How will they develop? Again, you have a large section who've gone in the opposite direction, who are timid and feminine and look down and won't look you in the eye and won't shake hands, and are just so disengaged and antisocial, they're not even there. He says we risk creating a society in which young men can no longer be men. Well, we know that can be true. And so a minority will give themselves over to the beast. Thankfully, most young men are too down and out. That's how I was just talking about that. Intrinsically decent to give themselves over to the beast, which is why America is overrun with atomized and passive Josephs. So people are atomized. We know that to be sure. We've talked about it. Isolated, depression, lonely. You see it. We just talked about it. Men don't look at you. Some men don't. Boys don't look at you in the eye. Even people helping you in a store or anything else are disengaged less and more shy. And it's okay to be shy, but I mean, just not able to interact. And men on strike. Other articles have men have decided to retreat to video games and home and staying in a room, right? Because that's safe, right? There's no risk there. If you want to walk over to a girl and ask her out, that's a risk. That's manly. If you want to start a new business, that's a risk. That's manly, right? If you want to engage with the world, that's riskier. You may be attacked. You may be whatever may happen. But if you sit in your room on video game, you can win the game all the time. Men on Strike talks about that in other articles. Less risk. You may not even date. You may be so withdrawn. So some men are on purpose. You need to be on purpose. Now he goes on to say, when he enters a coffee shop, he encounters a disheveled young man bent over his computer and staring at the screen with a blank matter that unsettles him. So I haven't seen this too much, but he's apparently seen it a lot. Like this beaten down brethren littered across the coffee shop in various states of Malay, the young man looks incapable of exerting himself physically. I've seen that for sure many, many times. Now that part I've seen. Incapable of exerting himself physically and imposing his will on the world. Oh, I've seen that one too. So physical, or there's a mental. I do see this, like I said, that timidness, that hesitancy, that head down, shoulders down, defeated, broken men, broken boys, broken young men, defeated. I think it's defeated is the word. But he still sets off my radar, so it sets off his radar. He can sense something. Seething, he says, something seething under there. Okay. So where do the young men who've embraced the beast go when traditional male spaces have been decimated? And here is really one of the big pieces of the piece that I think is very important for us as a society and as men to help other men. If we don't give them a place to go, they will go where? He says it right here. They find community online, of course. One of the great tragedies of our time, he says, is that male species in which young men learn to harness the beast have been at best compromised. The Boy Scouts, church, etc., and at worst altogether banished, right? So the churches today are weaker, so they can't get the values from there. Boy Scouts is not the same as it was. It's now called Scouts, not Boy Scouts. That's not the same. And that's where you could get good values before, right? Love your neighbor from the church, Boy Scouts, be cheerful, brave, right? All those good virtues that you learn in Boy Scouts and church. Church is weak. Boy Scouts is weaker. The most important figure in the life of a young man entertaining the beast is a well-adjusted man. That's correct. Who's faced it down and come out the other side. That's right. We learn from other men. Other men can teach you. You can gain wisdom from other men, 100%. So this is important and true. You get called out from other men if you're in a group. You get engaged, challenged by other men in a group. You learn from other men. Older men can pass down wisdom to younger men. You can get mentored, etc., etc. So this is a very important part of the piece. So either we can teach it or these other sides will teach it. One of the sides is going to grab them. The well-adjusted man will provide tough love, but if a young man who's embracing the beast isn't confronted, things will get uglier. True. If no one calls a man out, they could get worse, right? The young men, boys need to be directed, disciplined. Going on. This is how societal norms are enforced, and it can only happen in male-only spaces, 100%. Men teach other men how to become a man. But if society destroys these spaces under the guise of toxic masculinity, the civilizing power of the well-adjusted man will be lost. Remove the man and the beast will thrive. So this is a huge issue. Getting men together just in groups of men doesn't happen as much. It needs to happen. When you're in a male-only group, the group will say, hey, that's crazy. Don't do that. That's crazy. If someone is way out, men will call it out, right? So because they want you to be on the right path. You can be directed. Also, men don't have close friends now. So another problem, how is your close male friend going to, we've talked about this way back in friendship, so we're not going to go through the stats here again, but men just don't have close friends they talk to anymore. And you need close friends to hold you accountable, to tell you when you're off, to grab you and say, hey, wake up, man, you're not that, you're not that. If you're thinking you're something crazy, you're not that. You are a man, you are a boy, right? So going on, as the male spaces have disappeared in conjunction with the rise of toxic masculinity, ideology in a society that increasingly caters to the feminism. Well, we know that's true, right? Let me say that again. Ideology in a society that increasingly caters to the feminized. We know that. You saw it the last 2 years, how feminized. The budding antisocial young man naturally sets his sight on antisocial online spaces. So this is the big, large danger. If they're not in men's groups, if they're not in Boy Scouts, if they're not in church, if they're not in anything, and they're just sitting in a room and alone, online, they can go to some very dark places. A few decades ago, the internet was diffuse enough that radicalizing forces had to be actively sought out. Today, he says, those forces are sophisticated and calculatedly seek out the lost. Now, I have a friend, a good friend, Brian, who's talked about this. He says there's these sites where they go after young boys and try to confuse them on their identity and everything. Whether it be misogynistic spaces, racist forums, incel hubs, the antisocial young men, and Brian talked about some other ones. The antisocial young man now has a venue where he can meet fellow freaks and fester in this toxicity. So these sites, these online world, this dark world can target men and make them think they're not even men or whatever else they do. Target them for porn, target them for, I don't know, drugs, whatever they're trying to, bad habits. All these different things. These spaces, of course, are devoid of actual men. Radicalizing internet spaces are not only problematic because they attract the potentially violent, but the young men on the cusp would have been okay, he says, if they'd only come of age that didn't malign traditional masculinity, right? Because that starts the confusion when you're knocked all the time and said men are bad, men are bad, men are bad, and then offered them healthy male role models. So where are the healthy role models today? Where can boys find that? Where can men find it? Not in most films today, right? Going on. What we have now is a feminized society that doesn't admit that young men are struggling, and it doesn't, right? No one talks about it much. Some people talk about it now. but blames them for the suffering of others. So you got this victim mentality, blaming men for something they didn't do. We are in deep trouble when defective men who have committed themselves to evil, violence, pornography, and crime are often hanging out in the same spaces as lost young men who are merely culturally homeless and entertaining the beast, right? We've talked about this before, if you're the average of the 5 people you hang around most, and these guys are going on the dark web, I think this is a serious problem. It's really why I wanted to bring this article to you men and everyone on here, the women too, the mothers, whoever's on here. So if you become the average of the 5 people you hang around, and you're hanging around a dark web that's telling you crazy things, that you might be this, that you might be this, that explore wearing women's clothes or do this, or explore drugs, or explore, I don't know, some kind of crime or something, that's not great. It's not going to help you develop. Going on. The hand of cards drawn by so many young men is so bad that oftentimes it becomes impossible to tell the evil from the lost for him. So he's talking now again. But we have removed the social mechanisms that allow well-adjusted men to help their younger brothers, and have consigned confused youth to wander around the internet looking for meaning from wrong mentors. True. This is true. Many boys are isolated. They stay at home. They stay on the internet. They don't have friends. They play games. They stay on the computer. Again, the book on Men on Strike talks about that. So, and other articles I've read. So this is true. So he says, he goes on, it's impossible to know if the killers who committed horrific murders in recent months were all born evil, but I suspect that some of them could have been stopped if they hadn't been allowed to disappear from the realm of men. So probably, right, if you're isolated, depressed, even the Bible says it's not good for man to be alone. So you probably, look, humans are social. Most people need to be around other people at some point. So what does he end with? There is a man, beast, and monster. There is a man, beast, and monster. Man can transform into a beast and vice versa, but once a monster, always a monster. Well, people can come out of it if they do the right things, but I get what he's saying. To stop the beast from becoming a monster, we need to value men, he says. So that is true. Once again, grant them the societal power to rein in their wayward brothers. Yeah, that's right. Men need to bring in their wayward brothers. Men should be valued. It's important that men are valued. You men need to be valued. You are important to society. And you men need to help each other come along. He goes on to say men can be dangerous, yes, but their manhood is the only thing that can keep monsters at bay. True, manliness does keep bad guys at bay. It keeps monsters at bay, right? And the internal and the external threats. He ends with this. Society has a choice to make. And we do have this choice. And its survival depends on it. Do we want to be ruled by men or monsters? So some final comments. Interesting piece, I thought. Here's the thing. Either we're going to capture the boys and get them over to good online sites and in men's groups and in healthy ways and be friends to men and bring them along and mentor them over here. Or many of them, like you said, are going to go into this dark world like my friend Brian knew and like this article talks about. And they're going this dark internet world. And then if you're the average of the 5 people you're hanging around with, you're either going to go this side or this side. So that can increase their violence or increase what they're going to do next, or send them deeper into depression or deeper into problems over here. So we want them to be over here. So it's a battle for the soul of boys, right? And the soul of men. And society's coming at it saying men are bad, men are bad. So they've got to go somewhere, right? They got to get somewhere, right? So, think if you're in a Western film and a guy gets in a gang in a Western film, or a gang today, if a boy gets in a gang today, that's something we haven't brought up yet, but you can go into a good men's group or a gang, but people need to identify with something. And if they're being attacked and they feel powerlessness and they feel anxiety and anxious, they're probably going to go somewhere. Right. Just like men will and women will fill religion with something, you'll find a new ideology or religion, right? So if you don't have God, you'll fill it with something. You always fill something, and power vacuums get filled. So if there's a Western film and there's a gang of outlaws and a kid goes into that, he might go with the outlaws. But if he hangs around Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and the good guys, he might become one of the good guys, right? Or another Western, where the good guys are the heroes. So it's up to us to bring men and boys along. I do think it's important. One of the reasons we do this. And they'll either head over to the dark web or the good side. So we need to capture boys and men, and you need to help them along. We all need to develop. We need to help them. Thank you.